All right, so we are at Sarah's house, and there is construction in the basement, so sorry if there's background noise. I was really excited to try this recipe because about 10 years ago, my sisters and I were traveling, and we, at the airport, got some food to eat, and I got Wolfgang Puck's roasted butternut squash soup, and it was so good. I was like, I need to figure out how to make this. So I went home and found his soup online, his recipe, and I've made it a whole bunch of times, but you have to roast the butternut squash and the acorn squash, and then you caramelize the onions, and then you add in the squash and a whole bunch of broth, and you let it simmer for like an hour. It's just really time consuming. And so when I saw this recipe, I thought, you know what, that might be really good. And so I tried it, and it is really yummy. It has a lot of those same flavors and everything as that butternut squash soup without it taking days. So you put a little, I get one of these, they have these at RSM for less than $1, and so I keep that by my stove because I don't use oil to saute. So when the food starts to stick a little bit on the bottom, you just add a little bit of water, keep stirring. This says to just use a little bit of water to start with, and then you put the onions and the celery and the salt. Is 1 1/4 teaspoons, and the cumin is 1/2 teaspoon, and 1/2 teaspoon of, I got distracted, sorry, cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon allspice. Now these are lots of spices. If there's any one of these that you're like, I just really don't like that spice, leave it out. I got the basic recipe from this book from Joanna Burton, Plant-Powered Families. I made a few minor changes because that's what I do. One of the things that I added is cardamom, because that was one thing that was in the other recipe that I really liked that was not in this one. So hopefully we like it.
Have you not done that before?
You have to smell it,
I love
because
cardamom.
I think it smells like a pine tree. Like a Christmas tree almost, you know? So we're going to put that on the stove. Medium-high heat. And we're going to just let that cook for 5 to 7 minutes. And add extra water if we need to. And then, do you remember that we don't add the garlic until, you don't add it when the onions are sauteing because they'll burn. So we're going to add those with the water and everything else so it still cooks with everything, gives it the flavor without putting it on such a high heat that it'll burn. Okay? So we're going to add that, and a can of pumpkin, and a cup of rinsed lentils, and and you let them cook, and then use the immersion blender to blend it all and make it smooth. Any questions?
Pretty.
So last time we made the lentil sloppy joes, and those were the green lentils that keep their shape. And this time we're using the red lentils that kind of dissolve, and it makes it really good for when you blend it up. It kind of makes it all this really smooth consistency. So that's what we're doing today. So while that is cooking, I want to show you how to make this delicious chocolate chip cookie dough.
I'm
with
excited.
chickpeas. It's and I probably should have.
That's the secret ingredient. You just spoiled it right off the bat.
Yeah. This recipe, you can actually bake them.
Awesome.
But I prefer my cookie dough as cookie dough and not as cookies actually. So if you're gonna bake it, you should add the baking powder. And if you're not gonna bake it, you don't need to add the baking powder. Alright, I'm adding the water and the lentils.
Are the lentils soaked?
They're just rinsed.
Rinsed, okay.
You don't need to soak lentils like you do beef.
They just looked wet, so I was wondering. Yeah.
They are wet, and then if you let them sit, they kind of get hard. You just have to break them apart.
Like they start to stick together.
They just start
yeah.
to stick together, yeah. And then we have this can of, I'm going to do the garlic. And a can of pumpkin.
Smells so good.
Just make sure it's not pumpkin pie filling.
Is that spice?
Yeah, it has spices in it.
You want it to just be just the pumpkin. And this is the time of year that these get easier to find and they'll have them out on sale and stuff like that.
I always substitute pumpkin oil instead of oil in baking. I do pumpkin. It's amazing.
I
So much better than
remember doing
applesauce.
that.
Like, it just comes out.
I'll have to do that.
Crunchy, delicious texture. So good.
Like what kind of things do you use
Just
it for?
like if I'm doing, like sometimes you'll get a mix or something, like cornbread mix or a, and then we just substitute that instead of the oil.
Yeah.
Or I have a muffin recipe I use, and that it called for applesauce, but I didn't have any one time, so I used pumpkin, and that's when I started doing it. Because I'm like, oh yeah, this is so much better. It's just,
Now everything's in here. I'm going to bring that to a simmer and let it simmer for 20 to 25 minutes. Chocolate chip cookies. All right, so you just put those ingredients in there. Okay, so there's still that much left. Plenty for us to try.
Cute.
Stick this in the oven and it cooks for 15 minutes. Okay, so the lentils and the pumpkin and the onions and all the spices have been simmering for 25 minutes and they're all soft, and so we're gonna use the immersion blender to make it all smooth. This takes a while. You could put it in your blender. You totally put it in your blender. You might have to do it in batches, but you could do it in blender. So it does say 3.5 to 4 cups. So this is the point where you might say, oh, it's really thick, I want it a little thinner, and you could add some more water. This might be something that, the flavors kind of develop over time, so it might be better the next day. And I tried this with cashew sour cream the other day, and that's really yummy. You can put pumpkin seeds on top, and the suggestion was a splash of lime juice or lemon juice, so I brought that if you want to put a little of that on top. that.